Thank you everyone for joining us for JMT's webinar, Mission and Money, the Finance Imperative for Nonprofits with Christal Cherry. My name is Lauren Hogan and I'm a marketing specialist at JMT. And we're very excited to have Christal Cherry, Principal and CEO at the Board Pro, joining us today. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before I turn it over to Christal. If you have any questions during the webinar today, please go ahead and submit them into the Q&A section as you think of them. We'll save them all until the end of the presentation, but don't hesitate to submit them as they come. Also, just a reminder that we'll send both the slides and the recording of today's webinar within 24 hours after it has concluded. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Christal, to get started.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be here and grateful that I was invited to present on this topic. Excuse me. I am trying to, there I go. I had a little lag in my screen. I wanted to just say hello and introduce myself. My name is Christal Cherry, and I am a trained fundraiser with more than 22 years working in the nonprofit sector. I am a recovering fundraiser. That's how I describe myself. I'm also a board consultant, and I equip board members with the tools they need to effectively train their boards to govern. I'm a mompreneur, which means I am a mom and a business owner. I am a board member myself, and so I know what it's like to serve on a board. I serve on the Villages at Carver YMCA, which is a local Y here in Atlanta. And I am also a former board member of the Association of Fundraising Professionals. So just rolled off earlier this year. I'm an alumna of the United Way Volunteer Involvement Program, which is a program that teaches people how to sit on boards. I'm a graduate of both Hofstra University out of New York and Hampton University in Virginia, Hampton, Virginia. I'm a native New Yorker, so you'll hear a New York accent every once in a while. I'm a lover of anything purple. So I always like to give a little bit about myself so I can find out who I have some things in common with. So if you are a native New Yorker, a graduate of Hofstra and or Hampton, a lover of anything purple, give me a high five in the chat and let's just see who I have in my community. So I thought I would open it up with an introduction about nonprofit missions and money. You know, there's often tension between the pursuit of mission and the maintenance of financial viability at nonprofits. It puts pressure on the day-to-day operations and decision-making needed to run thriving organizations. And so I thought this would be a really neat topic for us to discuss today. I propose that one is not in favor of the other, but that they must be weighed together, and then a nonprofit's mission, capital structure, and organizational capacity must all be kept in balance, and your health of your organization depends on it. So today we're going to dissect some of these issues and maybe answer some important questions that you might have. And feel free to put your questions in the chat if you have any. So there's a real misconception that nonprofits cannot make a profit, that at the end of the year, we have to give all our money away so that we start off with a zero balance at the beginning of the year. This is just not true. It's a misconception that we cannot have a surplus. And the term nonprofit distinguishes us from organizations, from businesses with regard to purpose and tax status only. It has nothing to do with financing or budget constraints. Nonprofits have many financing options, including those available to for-profit businesses, and similarly to those free to make or lose money. So this whole idea that we can't make money, that we can't have an extra $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 at the end of our budget at the end of the year is just not true. I thought it was important to share that. So there are three financial characteristics of nonprofits. First, they all receive contributions to help them with resources. Oh, sorry here. There we go. They provide goods and services, and there are no ownership interests in nonprofits. The community the organization actually belongs to the community that it serves and that it lives in. So I really talk a lot about mission. I believe that mission matters a whole lot when we talk about this, and always stay focused on mission. This is one of the things that I always tell all of my clients, whether I'm working in fundraising or working in the board space. Focusing on mission, particularly in this last year when we've had so much craziness going on and so many organizations have had to pivot. Some organizations have even reviewed their missions to make sure that they were still relevant. But focusing on mission, even during a time when folks were not giving as much and funders were really switching their own priorities, was going to be really important in terms of being able to sustain funding during the pandemic. It is what matters most. It helps the organization to develop and adhere to their clear statement of purpose and their case for support. The trend now is for nonprofits to develop mission, vision, and value statements all at once. And so, excuse me, they can communicate them all over the place. I'd have mission statements all over the place if I owned a nonprofit. If I was the leader of a nonprofit, it would be in my physical workspace, it would be in my brochures, it would be on my website. We'd have it at the end of our signatures. In the communities that we serve, everyone would be clear on what the mission of our organization is. Excuse me. And we would need to resist pressure to, hold on, I'm getting this out of the way here, to go astray. I think a lot of times we had some organizations back during the pandemic who were trying to change their missions or trying to adapt their missions to social justice work, trying to incorporate, words like, inclusion and diversity. And if it fit, then I say absolutely. But I think we should stay focused on mission and not participate in mission drift, which is what happened, I think, with a lot of folks who were trying to get funding and to stay relevant. But if you stay focused on what your organization is supposed to be doing, then you're going to be successful regardless. So I want to talk about organizational capacity, which is really the sum of resources of an organization in the way that which they are organized. It's the organization's ability to govern, budget, hire, plan, implement, and evaluate. It's a combination of the sum of total skills, marketing, financial management, and program delivery, plus staffing, all equals organizational capacity. It really is just your organization's ability to operate as a business. And yes, nonprofits are businesses. I think a lot of people fail to realize that in order for this nonprofit to actually work, I mean, I have to convince my programs folks, my social workers, the folks who work in other departments, that this is actually a business. I know we're here to serve our constituents and we're here to make the community better and to make the society better and all of those good things. But at the end of the day, in order for us to function, we have to operate like a business. And so that's a really good reminder, I think, for folks who often don't deal with the numbers, don't deal with fundraising, they don't deal with budgets, but we really are a business. And so I want to take a few moments to show this video. Prayerfully, I'm going to be able to do this okay, because my fingers seem to be a little slippery today with the mouse. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and then I'm going to share again and see if I can get to my my video up here, if I can find it. Let's see. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I don't see it just yet. I know I got it up before we started. Let me stop again. Don't see my video. Hello. Okay, let me make sure I have it. Just hold on one second, guys. It is here. There it is. Okay. Make sure again. I don't see it. I'm not sure why it's not showing. I have it up in the background. Okay, well, we're going to skip the video because I can't seem to find it here on my screen. Okay, we'll have to, you guys can see the video in the actual slide deck that I have here. So when you get a chance, check out this video. It's just really a wonderful video that talks about nonprofit budgeting, the importance of understanding a budget in nonprofits. And so I'm sorry I can't show it to you today, but when you're in spare time, if you can get a chance to look at it, please do so. I want to talk about the role of management in financial stewardship. Management is responsible for all information, including adopting sound policies. And when I say management, I mean the board, which is the constituency group that I work with, and the executive leadership of a nonprofit. They establish and maintain controls over authorization, recording, processing, and reporting transactions and events. They hire competent staff to ensure internal controls are in place to ensure that your goals and objectives are being met, and that there's efficiency and effectiveness in operations. And so we can't underestimate the importance of having leadership who really understand the importance of understanding financial stewardship, particularly the board. And I would say from being a board member myself, that most people don't think of themselves as financial whizzes. And so this is the area of board service we probably don't pay that much attention to, but we really do have financial oversight of the organization. And so this means being prepared to attend board meetings and reading financial information before the meeting. I have learned to do that, making sure that I've reviewed the finance statements and the budgets before the meeting. And if I have any questions about anything, I normally circle it or highlight it so that when we get to the meeting, I know where in the meeting to ask the right questions so I can get my answers. Participating in discussions that allow me to exercise my independent judgment and helping to make good decisions. Knowing again how to when to ask questions to get a full understanding of the financial picture. No one wants a board member making decisions about finances when they don't really understand the budget or the finance statement, right? Being able to review your 990 before it's filed, to be familiar with the information. Remember, your 990 is your outward face to the world, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Understanding the impact of revenue and fund development approaches, understanding the role of the treasurer and finance committee, and then creating operating reserves and ensuring there's an annual audit. So the board plays a huge role in making sure that the organization is financially solvent. And as good stewards of the monies that we are raising, it is our responsibility to make sure that we understand our roles and responsibilities in this way. So the role of the finance committee, I think that's one of the most important committees. Of course, governance and fundraising and programs and the executive committee are also important. But the finance committee is really the finance committee is the committee that's monitoring the funds and the monies that are coming in and going out. So they review and monitor financial reports. They're reviewing the annual budget and making recommendations for the board's approval. They're reviewing all the major grants and associated terms with grants. And they're recommending financial policies, procedures to make investments, strong investments for the organization. So the role of the financial committee, it's really a big one. And so you really want to have folks on that committee who really know what they're talking about. And so while all board members don't have to be financial whizzes, you do want the folks on your finance committee to have some knowledge about finances. And so the way that the board can fail to understand finances, and when they do, what happens is you got members voting to approve budgets that they don't really understand. That's not a good look. They're making decisions about whether or not to hire new people, not knowing whether or not the organization can afford new salaries and benefits. And they're voting on fundraising approaches when they're not really clear on cost benefit analysis to determine which approaches are the best choice. And so as a fundraiser, as a recovering fundraiser, as I shared with you earlier, having a board that really doesn't understand fundraising is really makes my job as a chief development officer or director of development really difficult. And so when your board members fail to understand finances, your organization is not poised to do well with finances and fundraising. So this is an area that really, I really want to encourage people to take this area seriously. Finances can tell your story. You can look at a financial statement and tell a lot about an organization. You can look at the numbers and see when there have been lags in fundraising, when there's been an up and down, increase and decrease in staff. When grants have rolled in and done very well, or grants have lapsed off, or donors who have lapsed off. And so your financial statement can tell a really strong story about who you are, good or bad, right? And so you want to make sure that you understand what those finances are looking like. And when you look at your statement, that you have a clear picture of what's going on with your organization. And your 990, as I mentioned earlier, fits into the foundation of a healthy nonprofit. And your finances tell you when it's okay to tap into reserves, because last year a lot of organizations did have to tap into reserves, and so you want to have a business continuity plan so that when there are times of crisis, you have an emergency plan in place that says, during times like this, when there's a shortage of funding, that it's okay to tap into endowment or tap into reserves. And so these are the things that you need to know about finances and understanding the role that they play. So the statement of financial position, which is also called a balance sheet, summarizes the assets and liabilities that an organization has at a specific time. The focus should be on how your organization is trending, looking for unusual activity. Like, we did really well in June last year. What's happening now? This is June. We're not doing as well. What's going on to make our numbers go down? Your financial statement, will also tell you how much cash you have on hand if there's immediate debt. It'll also tell you how much you owe. And then you'll know what assets are unrestricted and allowed, that you have liquid cash that you have at your fingertips in times of crisis. I want to talk about the impact of donors in this, right? So we know that the top two interests of people who support organizations, your funders, is financial efficiency and the impact that their donation actually has. And so as an organization, we want to be able to show them that we are doing well in both of these areas. So more about that 990 that I talked about earlier. This is a document that's often overlooked, unfortunately. This is a required document by the IRS. Again, it's a snapshot of who your organization is. It tells about your mission. In your document, you can share about new programs, your financial status, and the health of your organization. And so if this document is not filled out correctly or not completely, funders will keep moving. They will not support you. And so it's really important that this organization, that this document is filled out completely. So it can be a determinant of investment worthiness, right? And so a funder can look at you and say, not so much. We don't think we're going to invest in this one. So you want to make sure that document is filled out properly. It should accurately represent your organization and tell your story. And that's why your board members should see it before it's filed. It has to be filed in every year. And again, it's your outward face to the world. And so I'm hoping that everyone who's on the call today knows what a 990 is and have looked at them. And if you haven't, find your favorite nonprofit and look up their 990 to check out all of this information. It should be on there. It could be a little intimidating, but if it's filled out correctly, it really will give you a good picture of that organization. And so I want to stop now, Lauren, and ask, are there any questions in the chat that I should stop and pay attention to?
Not seeing any right now, but don't forget, you can always submit them throughout the whole webinar, and we would love to answer.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, those operating reserves. How many organizations wish they had them in 2020, right? A board and leadership should establish a goal for the reserve for 3 to 6 months of expenses. I mean, I have worked for organizations that had 3 to 6 days cash on hand. And you better believe those were some scary times. We didn't know whether we were going to make a payroll, but best practices say that you should have 3 to 6 months, and based on last year, 6 months to a year worth of expenses on hand if you need them, and maybe develop a policy to specify when it can be used and who's authorized to spend those funds. But if last year taught us nothing else, is that we have to have a plan B, and that means having some kind of emergency fund in place in case everything goes left, like what happened last year. So operating reserves are a huge part of organizational capacity. Planning for growth and expansion. I mean, the worst thing for me as a fundraiser is to have a CEO who keeps adding programs with no idea how we're going to fund them. Where we're going to put the extra students or the extra nursing home. I had a CEO who could not say no. And if anyone came to him with a new idea about a new program, he was like, let's go for it. Without really giving it a whole lot of thought. And that's really scary for a fundraiser. But expansion and programming affects finance structure and organizational capacity. And that's one of the things that I think my CEO failed to understand, that we must be strategic to prepare for expansion beyond programs, so that we know that if there's going to be requiring some new buildings or some new equipment, that we have the cash on hand to actually be able to buy those things, right? Lack of focus on right programming could result in mission creep, as I mentioned earlier. Start doing things. I remember one time I had a donor who I had approached about supporting our nonprofit, and we provided financial literacy to children. And she was interested, but she wanted to give us money to provide financial literacy to adults, which is not what we did. And my CEO was like, let's start a program so that we can get this money and we can start a program. But I'm like, that's not what we do. So we can't change our mission just because we have a donor who's willing to throw money at you. So really staying focused on money and not creeping away from your mission. And then also, a holistic approach requires fixed, balanced relationship between programs, capital structure, and organizational capacity. So, planning your growth strategically is going to make a huge difference in whether or not your organization is going to be successful. Just saying yes to the ideas without really thinking it through is going to put you in your organization in a bind. And so, I think it's really important that we think about those things as we move forward. Knowing the difference between programs and businesses, nonprofit leadership must determine which programs and subset programs have synergy and support the mission. Um, so for instance, if your mission was disseminating the work of female choreographers in the 20th century, some businesses that you may start that can help bring in revenue might be like a touring dance company or a dance school or creating a film series or having a gift shop in a museum, right? Those are businesses that you're actually starting under the umbrella of the organization as opposed to them being programs. These are different sources of revenue coming in. Each are quite different and require a different capital structure, but all should support the mission. And these programs used to grow cash, it has different business models with fixed assets. So just knowing the difference between programs and businesses. And I had bosses that said, let's start a new program. Well, that's not a program, that's actually another business. Knowing the difference between restricted versus unrestricted grants, and both have their advantages and their disadvantages. Of course, everybody wants unrestricted funds because it's liquid money, right? There's flexibility in spending it. Most of the time, it's short term, and you can support your mission in multiple ways. So, unrestricted funds are definitely desired. Restricted funds, of course, have greater risk, more demands on capacity. There are additional expenses often not covered by a grant. So, for instance, if you have to hire new staff or find new space to expand your after school program, then now you have to pay for rent, right? And so those are sometimes things that the grant won't cover. So sometimes unrestricted money puts a strain on the budget, right? Of course, they're time sensitive and complicated to report because often if you get a restricted grant from a funder, they want you to complete an impact report, which you have to explain how those monies were spent. And so the worst thing is not having a proof of that, or not having spent all the money, or maybe not spending money the way that it should have been spent. That will put you in a real pickle. So knowing the advantages and disadvantages of having restricted versus unrestricted grants. So one of the things as a fundraiser that I always know and understood was there was always tension between the fundraising team and the finance team. And I just think we were both in our own worlds. The finance team wants to, everything by the numbers. The fundraising team are dealing with people and donors who are emotional. And so often there would be some tension between the two groups. But I believe that we can get along, right? So the development team raises money, the finance team manages the money, but there could be a strong and strategic relationship between the two to ensure that we're being accountable to our donors. So the fundraising team is saying, what do key processes look like for each of them? How does each team define important terms? Who is doing the reconciliation work? How can we mitigate human error during these processes? So these are the questions that are going back and forth between those teams. And so I just remember always trying to get that check cut or trying to get that check in the bank. fighting with the people on the finance team to make sure the money was going in, it was going in properly, making sure that it was going in a timely fashion so that we could send a thank you and make sure that we're stewarding the donor and all those kind of good things. And so I think this should just be a real come to Jesus with the two teams so that both understands what each is trying to accomplish. So before we talk about restricted grants and unrestricted grants, I want to talk about just general restricted and unrestricted funds. Restricted funds fuel your programs for sure, but unrestricted funds fuel your growth. They can be used to build infrastructure and to innovate. And your finance team can feel good knowing that funds are available that can be used for any purpose. And so, again, unrestricted funds, that's all I would hear was that we have to raise unrestricted money so that we have money at our fingertips so that will allow us to be flexible in how we spend it. So yeah, I think it's really important. Okay, finance team. Your finance team supports investment in development communications. They inspire confidence. They have development and communications that are intertwined. Getting info out about the donor's impact is a priority. Sharing financial information that shows leadership has a solid plan where the budget has and actuals actually match is ideal. Includes details, both numbers and narratives about your finances on your website and annual reports and other marketing materials. So the finance team is really important and they do great work. The fundraising team involves finances in building case statements and donation solicitations. Development focuses on raising unrestricted funds. Finances can help to answer questions like how much money do you need for this project? What happens if you receive more donations than you need? What exact language should be used? So having finance involved from the very beginning helps avoid conflicts surrounding these issues later. I thought I'd share the state of nonprofit fundraising now after our crazy pandemic last year. So nonprofits are still constrained by their lack of resources, but it's improving year over year. I think last year a lot of folks really suffered. Some have hobbled back, and some are really still struggling. They're still not putting enough effort into developing strategic plans. You'd be surprised how many organizations don't have one. And I just think that's a wrong move. So we really definitely need to have nonprofits who have strategic plans and are refreshing their strategic plans. You may have done a strategic plan 10 years ago. Times have changed in 10 years, and so your strategic plan needs to be refreshed. We need to improve relational fundraising work, which means we need to have ways that donors can give to us easily and consistently, right? So like having recurrent giving and monthly programs. We need to look at our technology that we're using or not using, right? And so I did a webinar on trying to how to get your CEOs and boards to embrace digital fundraising. Because some of them are still in the ice age and they believe we should have pie sales and just contact Oprah Winfrey. And all we have to do is ask her and she's going to give us $8 trillion, right? And that's really not what fundraising is. It really is these days more sophisticated. Donors are more savvy. They're using technology every day to give money, to find out who organizations are and how they can support them. And so those organizations that are not investing in technology, not learning about it, are really going to be behind the times and being more strategic with fundraising plans. I don't know, something like 67 or 70% of nonprofits don't have fundraising plans. Yikes. And the excuse that we get is that they don't feel like they have time to put one together, or we have fundraising plans created for us that are just way over our head and our means. And so we'll get a nice fancy fundraising plan created. We hire a consultant, they put together a fancy fundraising plan. It's not realistic. You don't really have all those resources that the plan assumes you have. And then that plan goes on the shelf and no one looks at it ever again. So if you're going to create a fundraising plan, make sure that it's realistic and it's tailored to where your organization is right now. So I suggest that we chase the money, chase the mission and not the money. The money will end up following you. And that's according to the CEO of Zappos. And so that is my presentation for today. I really am curious about questions and answers and your response to the information that I presented to you today. Before we get into that, I just wanted to share that I do have a new ebook out. It's called Silence is Not Golding, Training the Woke Board About Racial Equality. And you can pick up a copy of that on my website. I'm really bummed that I couldn't show you guys that video. It was really a cute little video. So if you get a chance, make sure that you get a chance to check it out. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Lauren, are there any questions or comments about the presentation?
Yeah, I don't see any coming through. Don't forget to submit them through the Q&A. We did have a chat though earlier. You have a fellow Hampton pirate. And yeah, we'll definitely send out that video in the follow-up. So
Yes, I'm so sorry I couldn't get it to work, you guys. I'm still working out the Zoom stuff.
it can be, I don't know why, sometimes it can be weird about videos and sharing the screen. So
It's always a risk when you add one to your presentation, but I wanted to add it in there for you because I thought it could be good, juicy information. So, but I think this whole topic about mission and money is really important in that we realize they have to be weighed together. One is not in favor of the other, but that they have to be weighed together. So yes, we want to pursue mission, but we also have to be conscious of money and how it's being spent so that we can continue to fulfill a mission for years to come. So I'm hoping the information was helpful to you guys. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at hello@theboardpro.com and or check out my website if you're in need of board services.
yeah, thank you so much, Christal, for joining us today. We'll also include Christal's contact information on the follow-up. So be looking out for that as well. And thank you everyone for joining us as well.
Thank you. Have a good day today.
Yeah, everyone have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.